Right. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to attend today. I apologize that last week we had to cancel and reschedule this class. Excuse me. Sorry. If you do happen to know anyone that was signed up for it that isn't able to make it today, do know that everyone will get an email after this of a recording of this class as well. So they don't miss out. Today we're going to be going over the Oregon State Law SB608 and House Bill 291. Essentially known as the statewide kind of rent control law, no cause notice reform. And then HB 291 has to do with new screening requirements at the state level. Excuse me. Of course, as I'm sure a lot of people know, issues like this are currently being debated at the state level for the new laws for this year. Sorry, geez. Of course, the moment I turn on the recording, I get a frog in my throat. Sorry about that. So currently being debated at the state level right now this year, and I would assume we'll see some changes, not necessarily, as far as I know, I don't think we have any major changes to the stuff we're going to talk about today, but we will probably see some changes to the state landlord tenant law sometime in the near future this year. I would say just also that's perfect segue to introduce myself, Christian Bryant. I'm president of rpmeducation.org, which is who is awarded the landlord tenant education grant that has made this class free for you guys to attend. And I'm also president of IRC Real Estate and Property Management in the Portland metro area, as well as Central Oregon, where we manage long-term as well as short-term rental properties, as well as assist investors in buying and selling rental investment properties, things like that. Sorry, guys. And then, of course, president of the Portland Area Rental Owners Association. And definitely, whether it's the Portland Area Rental Owners Association or Multifamily Northwest or the Rental Housing Association of Oregon. If you aren't already, definitely I encourage you to join a local nonprofit association like that, because they are typically the ones that are have representatives and or committee members on the front line, so to speak, at the state and local level when it comes to the landlord tenant laws that are being debated and passed. So by being, of course, a member of those, you are able to know right away whether it's big enough news to be reported in the regular news or not. You'll be able to know right away when those updates and changes come along. Let's go ahead. Let's see, is Patrick here? All right, doesn't look like he's here yet. Okay, we'll go ahead and jump right into it. Disclaimer and rules. Everyone that is here got, of course, the email with the link to be here, and in that same email is a link to the cloud shared class materials folder. In there is a nice printer-friendly version of all of these slides, so you have this in writing, this wonderful disclaimer written by my liability attorneys. So I'm not going to force you to listen to me read it word for word, and we'll trust that if it applies, you will definitely read it on your own. The gist of it, though, is that I am not an attorney, nor am I giving official legal advice today. And as if you've taken classes from me before, you've heard me say this many, many times. If I look at it, if you are a property manager, excuse me, you should look at a landlord attorney or attorney that specializes in representing landlords in the areas where you actually have rental properties. Treat it like an emergency plumber. You should know who you're going to call before you need them. Hopefully you never need them and you never call them. So do that research ahead of time, because lots of times if you do find yourself in a situation where maybe emotions got the best of you and you said or did something you maybe weren't allowed to legally or shouldn't have done, or for whatever reason leads to tenant decides to write you, have their attorney write you a nice scary letter, you may have a limited amount of time to reply and everything. You don't want to end up having to waste time just researching who's a good landlord attorney in your area, because they are few and far between. Like Portland metro area, I would say it's probably 3 I can name offhand. I would assume there's probably at least one or two more that I don't know of. But that, you know, and so as you get outside of the Portland metro area, then of course that number I'm sure shrinks considerably. So do that research ahead of time. My opinions are just that. Of course, what's on my slides has been approved, but unfortunately, the city of Portland, Portland Housing Bureau and Rental Services Office, who facilitates and provides this education grant, or the Portland Area Rental Owners Association, who is our advertising partner in getting the word out for these classes. Or rpmeducation.org that facilitates everything. It's kind of the admin on everything. Don't control what comes out of my mouth. So with that said, please don't blame them if you say anything too totally crazy. I've been teaching these classes for going on, I don't know, 12, 13 years now. So far, haven't gotten myself in trouble, so we should be okay. Feel free to ask questions. I believe we should have, I want to say we had around like 80 or 90 pre-registered. Some of them got the pre-recorded thing and whatnot, but I would assume we'll probably end up with at least 50, 60 live attendees today. So do try to help us keep things organized. If you have a question that is actually on topic for me to read aloud and answer as part of the class, please use the separate Q&A section and not the regular webinar chat window. The separate Q&A section, typically the link in the Zoom links is right next to the chat window. It has two overlapping chat bubbles and literally labeled Q&A. Try to use that if you can. I believe you guys should have the option. Yes, if you go in there, if there's something I haven't answered yet that is similar to your question, you just click the little thumbs up. The more thumbs up a question has, when I go to answer questions, going to have a higher priority rank on my screen and get answered first. Also, you can add comments and attachments, like it's like, oh, my question's similar to that, but what about this unique thing? Or maybe you posted a question and then I ended up answering as part of the class. You can help all of us out by jumping in there and just typing in sorry, just typing in that, oh, you already answered this, go and skip it. And then no one has to listen to any dead air of me reading through something I don't need to answer. So try to use that separate Q&A section. For the actual chat window, that is number one, that is for you guys to use as a way to essentially pass notes in class without disrupting the class. So if you have a question for your fellow landlords of, hey, I'm looking for someone that does this or some system that does this or whatever, use the chat window for that. The other thing, which looks like at least 3 of you have already used it for, which if you've already done this, you don't need to repeat it. Use the webinar chat window to do your continuing education certificate check-ins. So go ahead and do that now. If you are expecting continuing education credit, unfortunately, the City of Portland grant is not allowed to be used to pay for any professional licensing. Continuing education has to be free, just to attend education for landlords. And that's why we have to have the upcharge, unfortunately, if you want to continue education credits. But if you did pay for that, please go ahead and do your beginning of class check-in now if you haven't already. If you guys already did it, you're one of the few 3 or 4 that have already done it. Don't need to repeat yourself. Just name as it appears on your license number, broker affiliation. Go ahead and throw that in the webinar chat. And then might be in the middle, but I think with these classes, they're a little bit shorter. So probably be towards the end or whatever, we will ask for another check-in. It's basically just part of the record keeping process that we're required to keep. So that way, when we're audited in the future, we can prove that, oh yeah, not only did they pay for it, but as you can see, they checked in and they were actually paying attention and learning as we taught the class. I believe this class, we typically come in, depending on number of questions and stuff, but we typically come in close to about an hour and a half or so. So we should have actually plenty of time, but even nonetheless, we take the full 2 hours. I always schedule myself for at least to stick around for an additional 15 minutes after to answer any landlord tenant related questions. So if you do have, we're going through the class, you have a question that comes up that's not necessarily on topic, so you don't want to throw it in the Q&A to have me answer as part of the class, make a note of it at the end of the class, go ahead and toss it up there. And I should have plenty of time to get to that. Let's see. We'll see how things are going around the hour mark, around 12:30 or so, depending on where we're at in the class. Good chance if we don't have a ton of questions that we'll probably just power through, not take that break. But if it looks like we're going to end up taking the full 2 hours, then I will try to give you guys like a 5-minute break around halfway through. Okay. Clear the throat one more time and we'll officially jump into it. Patrick. Names there. Okay. Okay. Get something situated here. Okay. There we go. Cool. All right. So jumping right into it. Oh, of course. There we go. That is actually one thing I should point out as we go through this class. This class is 100% focused on state law, SB608, and of course, House Bill 291. And so with a lot of you, I'm sure we have people joining from around the state, but also, I mean, a lot of you are advertising focused in the Portland metro area. If you have a rental property that's located within the city limits of Portland, then the relocation fee ordinance that has to do with the rent increase stuff and no cause ordinance, possibly some of the fair ordinance stuff will probably also apply to your property. When there are things where I know there are some crossover laws like that, I'll try to point those out as best I can. But do check our event schedule because all those Portland specific laws are also free classes that are paid for by the Housing Bureau and that landlord education grant. So I'm sure we'll have one coming up soon if you haven't already looked up the information on that. Excuse me, but I will try to point out things where there is some overlap, not to dive into it and spend time on it today, but just so that you can flag your own notes of, oh, okay, I also need to look up what the corresponding city law might be for that. I know the city of Eugene, I believe, or was it the county down there, has recently passed a local law. I know the Bend, Central Oregon, Deschutes County area is looking at possibly passing some local laws. I definitely know the state stuff and city of Portland stuff. Outside of that, definitely accept the disclaimer that it's up to you to go ahead and look up any additional local laws that might apply. And typically, if you have competing or differing laws between your local city or county and the state, vast majority of the time, not 100%, of course, can't guarantee that, but vast majority of the time, the one that you're going to have to follow is whichever one is the most strict, or probably as a landlord, the one that you're hoping you don't have to follow is probably the one you do have to follow. So just as a good general rule. All right, let's jump into it. So for state law, SB 608, we're going to start with no cause termination. It is still allowed in the first, let me shrink something here. There we go. It is still allowed in the first year of occupancy with at least a 30-day notice. If you have a fixed term lease, so you're not month to month, okay? And one thing to know, just for legal terminology, the term lease is all encompassing of a fixed term, long-term lease, like a 1-year lease, as well as a month-to-month lease. So when I use the term lease, understand I'll differentiate between the two if there is a difference, but if I just use the term lease, then that definitely includes both fixed term and month to month. So you can do a no cause termination in the first year of occupancy with at least a 30-day notice throughout the state of Oregon. If it's a fixed term lease, then the 30-day notice must expire or have the move out date be on or after the lease expiration date. Excuse me, sorry guys. And not or, but and on or prior to the tenants be officially occupying that unit for a full year. Okay, so a couple things here. One, this is definitely the first time to kind of flag you. The City of Portland relocation fee ordinance law would make this to where if you did a no cause notice in the first year, it would have to be a 90-day notice, and two, unless you qualify for one of the City of Portland exemptions, you would probably have to pay the City of Portland relocation fee. Excuse me. Again, I'm not going to go into super detail on that. I have a whole hour and a half, 2-hour class that I teach on that specifically. That's free for you guys to take, but just flag your notes if you have a rental property in Portland and you want to look that stuff up too, because it does apply here. One thing that is important to note here, this actually changed how my policy on how we scheduled our 1-year leases in the first year, what we scheduled the expiration date as. Prior to this law being passed, if a tenant moved out or moved in, let's say, let's see here, we're in March, we've got 31 days in this month. Let's say they moved in the middle of March. Well, prior to this law, we would have made their 1-year lease, because we do 1-year leases that we renew on a yearly basis. We would have made their 1-year lease expire March 31st of next year, i.e. being, basically a year and plus a couple of weeks. Since this law was passed, if we did it that way, we would completely negate our right to be able to give a no cause notice in the first year, since the fixed term lease would not expire until after they've lived there a full year, and therefore we would not be able to meet the requirements of giving the fixed term the no cause notice that expires and has a move out date after their lease expires and prior to them living there a full year. So now we back it off, and instead of going a year plus a couple weeks, we go a year minus a couple weeks. So if they moved in middle of March, their lease would go until February 28th of next year, the end of February next year, basically being a couple weeks less. That way, we do have the ability, whether it's outside of Portland and it's 30 days, or it's inside of Portland, it's 90 days. We do still have the ability to give a no cause notice in that first year if we choose to. After the first year, officially by state law, you can't actually give a no cause notice, but they're basically just, creating new legal terms. So you're not officially able to give a no cause notice, because a no cause notice is just that. You have absolutely no cause for it. You're not giving any cause. Therefore, there's nothing for the tenant to fight back against, and they have to move out by this time. After that first year, you can't actually do that as defined, but you are still able to ask the tenant to move out through no fault of their own for a cause that is one of the approved landlord causes that we're going to go over. So first is, if say you have a multi-unit property, which prior to the crash in 2008, something that was possible was what was called, or was popular, was what was called condo conversions, or basically where, someone would buy anything from a 2-unit duplex to a 100-unit apartment complex, and they would go through the cost and the expense of officially separating everything into 0 tax lot units, condo units, and then sell them as individual condos instead of renting them as apartments or duplex units or 4-plex units or whatever it may be. And so that would be a good example of this case within the city limits. Outside of the city, it might be something to where maybe you've got that 10-acre parcel that happens to have 2 or 3 single-family homes on it, right? And they've never been separated by tax lot. If you happen to separate one off and sell that one, then that would be a qualifying reason. So that's your first. And this is, we'll go over timeline, relocation fee, and all that stuff towards the end of this. But after the first year, you have to qualify for or have one of these reasons in order to be able to tell a tenant they have to move out. And so one of the other things that this did is it made it to where if you're like a company like me, so if you just do month-to-month rental agreements or leases, then this doesn't necessarily affect you. If you're like my property management company, where we do a fixed term 1-year lease in the first year, and then we renew that for 1 year at a time after the case. Sometimes if they move in winter, we might renew it for 6 months or a year and a half, just so we can get the proverbial move out date to the summer months when it's easier to get things rented, things like that. But nonetheless, we try to do 1-year fixed term leases and renew them as such. What this law did is it made it to where, since we can't use a standard no cause notice, that was your only, like, you can still use it in the first year for the first renewal, but after that first renewal, if the tenant is paying their rent, they're not violating any lease terms, they're not violating any landlord tenant law issues in the state or your city or anything like that, then you can't just simply ask them to move out. You have to have one of these qualifying reasons and possibly pay them a relocation fee. So what it did is it made it to where, for companies like myself that prefer renewing 1-year fixed term leases, that in what it used to be is the teeth, so to speak, that we had was, here's our new terms for the new 1-year lease, right? Obviously, following rent increase limits, stuff like that, which we'll go over here later in the class. And either sign it, or here's your no cause notice to move out. Like, if you really wanted to be that strict about it, you could. I mean, that's not how we did business. Typically, we did business how we currently do. Excuse me. Sorry, guys. Oops, lost my camera. There we go. But now you're forced to do things how I've kind of always recommended people do them anyway. And that is that, so in that first year, if you want to be that strict about it, you can't, because you can still give a no cause notice if you're not worried about, losing the average of anywhere from 1 to 2 months worth of rent and turnover costs and lost rent and stuff. Or you have things to do with the property, whatever your reason, doesn't matter. You have that option the first year. After that, you have to do what I've always recommended, which is essentially give the tenant options, with the cheapest option being the one you want them to choose, right? So you give them a month-to-month, maybe a 6-month lease or a 1-year lease, and then you vary the rent increase amount on those to where the cheapest option is the one you want them to choose, and the most expensive one is the one you're hoping that they don't choose. And of course, as far as rent increase limits and go and stuff, we'll talk about that later. So that is your only option now, which, one thing I've always said is, unfortunately, some of these new laws have kind of forced landlords to, be extra serious and buckle down and really, do the job of a landlord by the book, writing out violation notices, even for warnings and small stuff, and really documenting everything, which is both a plus and a minus, depending on which side you're looking at it and what aspect. So anyways, after that first year, if you do want to ask a tenant to move out that is not committing any violations and they're paying their rent on time and everything, first one is if the unit is purchased separately from any other unit on that tax lot, as I already explained. Next one is if the landlord has accepted, and when I say landlord in this, it means property manager. So for instance, me as the property manager that is the landlord that people hire, I wouldn't qualify for any of these things that say landlord. It's the property, it's the actual owner of the property. So the landlord has accepted an offer to purchase specifically from a buyer that intends to occupy the unit as their primary residence, and that the landlord gives notice and evidence to the tenant of their move out notice within 120 days of accepting the offer. So the last part really only comes in play maybe in certain like 1031 exchange situations and things like that. But the first part is very important. So one of the number one questions we get, and this is also why one of the monthly classes I teach for the Portland Area Rental Owners Association is on, selling your property that has a tenant, a tenant in it. And one of the number one questions we get is, hey, I just want to sell this, single family home rental. Is that good enough reason to ask a tenant to move out? No, it's not. Putting in a sign in the yard and advertising it, not a good enough reason to ask a tenant to move out. You have to actually get an offer from someone that not only intends to buy it and that you accept their offer to purchase it, but also that they intend to occupy the unit as their primary residence. So if they're buying it as a investment property, you don't have the right to ask the tenant to move out. So because of this, you do need to be careful. Number one, if you're going to sell, especially your single family home rental, anything that is 4 units or less, quite frankly, because there's a good chance they're using a FHA owner occupied loan to where they're going to want to live in 1 unit, ask a tenant to move out. And so they can get their better financing rates and everything. Anything that's 4 units or less. I mean, if it's over 4 units, you should definitely be using a specialized agent, but 4 units or less, I strongly recommend you use a real estate sales agent like myself, and I'm definitely not the only one out there. There's plenty out there that actually specialize in and have experience selling a property with a tenant located in, residing in it. Like I said, I teach a whole, I think it's about an hour and a half or so class on the kind of art of selling your property with a tenant in it and how to negotiate with that tenant and make sure, you do your best to get them on your side to help you, by keeping things cleaned up for showings and things like that, that you want to be careful of. The other side of that is if you're selling that single family home rental property and say you're one of, I think it's like 46 or 48% of rental property owners in the Portland metro area that own 4 or less units individually, odds are you've got a mortgage on that place. If the possibility of that tenant moving out and the sale falling through would make it to where you'd be financially strapped and possibly miss a payment or something, then it's very important you have an agent that specializes in this so that you can be advised on protecting yourself as far as earnest money, non-refundable earnest money, when to make it non-refundable and directly paid out to you, whether or not it closes after that, possible outs that the buyer could have and having them waive those rights, like the inspection period or the appraisal or something to that effect. All those things that could kill the deal. But if you already gave your tenant this move out notice and they've already committed to moving out, you can't take it back and then fault them for it if they follow through and move out. So just understand going into that, if your goal is to sell that rental property, definitely doesn't mean it can't be done. It absolutely can be done with someone that knows what they're doing. But there are things to look out for just to protect yourself. If, the possibility of having a vacant unit with no rent coming in and a sell that falls through to where you don't have an accepted offer at this point, to where you're looking at, even if you accept an offer today, probably another anywhere from 1 to 3 months later before you finally actually close on it and everything, and covering those payments and everything. If that would put, some financial strain on yourself, then you're going to want to be very careful on how you counter an offer that you're willing to accept, and little things you want to put in to protect yourself and make sure that if it does fall through, you still have money to cover yourself for that lost rental income if that tenant's moving out. All right, clicked on the right screen. All right, yeah. Other reason you can use to issue a move out notice is if the landlord or owner intends to demolish or convert to a non-residential use. So converting to a non-residential use is fairly straightforward. Think Portland metro area like Hawthorne. If you're down like the Salem area, like South Commercial and Liberty, close to downtown, to where you had all these single family homes on these main drags converted into doctor's offices, dentist office, lawyers' offices, accountants, and et cetera, basic commercial use. Pretty straightforward. Before someone asks, it's not written into law and it hasn't gone to court that I'm aware of in the state. So I cannot say for sure that converting your long-term rental to a fully furnished vacation rental counts or does not count as non-residential use. If it's me personally or any of my clients that I manage property for that have done this since this law is passed, I have strongly recommended that they follow my advice of wait until the long-term tenant moves out, or you have a legally qualifying reason to ask them to move out, which, as you'll see in the next one, doing a full renovation or something like that would probably qualify, and make that a clean break legally, and then go with a vacation rental, just because it's not defined in the law. And I have no interest in having one of my clients be the ones that gets made the example of in court, to where, who knows, maybe they win and it goes up to, Court of Appeals and makes it case law, and the rest of us get to benefit from it. But I don't want one of my clients to have to be the one to spend $100 grand to make that happen. So that is my official advice, if that's the kind of conversion you're thinking of. But If you intend to demolish it, which is also just an FYI, is also an exemption to the City of Portland relocation fee. If you know that you're going to demolish it prior to renting it out to someone for a short-term period. But if you're going to demolish it, which demolishing, it's not a matter of, oh, what if I do a 90% renovation? Nope. You have to clear the thing from the earth and build a new structure. Or not even build a new structure, just clear the thing from the earth, because you could just be demolishing the spot because it's more valuable as a vacant, commercial or industrial unit because in zoning changes or something like that. If you're going to demolish, do a full demolish of it, then it qualifies. And then leading into, possibly converting it, say you want to do a full renovation, upgrade everything, all the bathrooms and the kitchens and all that stuff, and turn it into, a nice, short-term vacation rental or something like that, leads right into the next option that you have, or reason you can use to ask a tenant to move out through no fault of their own, which is if you intend to repair or renovate the unit. Very clear distinction you need to make. You can't use this as a loophole in the sense of you can't decide, oh, I just need to repaint all the interior walls. And since that's a repair or renovation, I'm going to ask you, tenant that I don't like, to go ahead and move out and give you your notice. Unfortunately, that wouldn't qualify. You have to either be fixing a habitability violation or standard, which is, what I'll cover kind of, a quick review of that here in a second, or the repair renovation that you're going to do will cause a habitability violation during that process, right? So it can't be something simple like painting or replacing carpet, to where you could do it one room at a time and you're not violating any habitability stuff. So basic habitability and things that would really come into play here. Obviously, they need working electricity. They need working HVAC and heating, especially in the winter months. They need, here's the important ones when it comes to renovations. They need fresh flowing plumbing to be able to dispose of their waste in a safe and sanitary way. They need access to fresh flowing healthy water, both for cooking and bathing. They need the ability to store food long term, i.e. they need a working fridge of some kind. They need the ability to cook food, i.e. they need at least a working hot plate or stovetop or oven of some kind at the bare minimum, all of that stuff. So if you're doing a full renovation to where they're not going to have access to the kitchen, they're not going to have access to the bathrooms, then absolutely no questions asked, it qualifies totally. If you're trying to sparse things, if you do a full kitchen renovation and they're not going to have access to the ability to cook food or store food for a while, you're gonna have to cut the electricity, probably turn off the water, definitely qualifies. If, let's say, you have a unit that has 2 full bathrooms, okay? Well, let's go here. You have a unit that is just one full bathroom, might be 1.5 bath, but it's one full bathroom, i.e. there's only one bathroom that is accessible for fully, bathing, getting rid of waste, all that stuff. Say there's a major leak of some kind, there's dry rot, to where the only fix is you got to replace all the flooring, you got to replace the framing around the tub and the tile surround, and basically you got to do a full kitchen renovation or bathroom renovation. Unfortunately, these days, the way contractors are backed up, it's going to take you a month to get it done. It's not the old days where you get that done in 3 to 5 days. But yeah, don't get me started on that and how much longer things have started taking in my lifetime. I grew up with a dad that was a custom home builder. So unfortunately, I know how much time it actually takes to do things, and it blows me away that we're looking at an average of like 30 days to get crap like that done these days. Anyways, if you have one full bathroom or 1.5, and that full bathroom has to be renovated to where it's out of commission, that is a habitability violation, would be a qualifying reason to ask the tenant to move out. If you have 2 full bathrooms, and it's just one bathroom that has the leak and the problem, and that's the only bathroom that they're going to not have access to. And before you ask, well, wait, in order to work on that, we need to shut off, the water to the whole house. No, you don't. Technically, you hire a plumber that knows what they're doing. You can have them have the first thing they do, install a separate shut-off valve directly to that bathroom and everything that is used in that bathroom, have it shut off. Tenant still has access to the other toilet. I'm not saying that's ideal. I'm just saying, you don't want to challenge it, because there are things like that, to where if the tenant decided to hire a tenant attorney and sue you over it, it's not a hard argument to make. So if you're doing that one, just the one, it's not a habitability violation, would not be a qualifying reason. Now, nothing on here says that it has to be fixing a habitability thing. Maybe that bathroom is shut down because of, the plumbing backed up and who knows what, that bathroom is not usable. If you decided, I'm going to go ahead and spend the money, since I have no choice but to upgrade and renovate this bathroom, I'm going to go ahead and spend the money to just upgrade by pure personal choice, upgrade and renovate the other bathroom at the same time. Now they're both out of commission. It is a habitability violation, and it does qualify as a reason to ask them to move out. Or you're doing any other work on the property and you want to just go ahead and add in renovating both the bathrooms or renovating the whole kitchen on top of that, then it qualifies. So that's the big thing, is what you actually do has to cause a habitability violation. Now, how long it's out of commission and whether or not that counts, kind of up to you. And actually this ties, it looks like it ties right into Eva's question that she just posted. What if the furnace stops working and will take 3 weeks to replace, but the tenant does not want to move out anyway? Does it still qualify if they prefer not to? So this is kind of where you have to use your best judgment as a landlord, and you can't change this choice based on whether you like the tenant or not, whether or not you would want to do that. You kind of need to decide what your policy is and make sure you understand that how you apply it to this tenant is how you need to apply it to future tenants as well. And that is where your cutoff line is. So for within my company, if the repair or renovation, whatever it is, it's going to make it uninhabitable, or is going to take a week or less, then it's automatically assumed we're going to pay to go ahead and put the tenant up in what the law considers a comparable hotel unit. So something that has a kitchen or something. Doesn't need to be the Ritz if they're not renting something that's $5,000 a month. If they're renting something that's $2,000 a month, then it's an average hotel room with kitchen and so they can cook their own food and things like that. Which you'd be surprised, there's more than you would think options available for long-term stay hotels, which is basically what that is when it comes to the kitchen and stuff. If it's going to be a month or more, then it's a automatic of no, you're going to need to move out. And technically, we give them the 90-day notice, as you'll see here is required here, but you also get along with that, make sure it's communicated to them, whether it's in writing or not. Writing is best, in my opinion. That, hey, since it's currently not habitable, by all means, move out tomorrow, and you won't be charged for rent from this day forward since it's not habitable, right? So that way it's assume, hey, move out as quick as you can. If it's in between there, which is your case with this HVAC thing, it's going to take 3 weeks. Then typically we give the tenant the option, quite honestly. And we give them the option of, hey, if you want, you're welcome to go ahead and move out. Or if you want, we can put you up in a hotel room. Or if your furnace that is out, if they still have electricity there, and this might be your cheapest option, quite honestly, is go down to Home Depot or Lowe's. And I want to say the last time I checked, the really nice big ones made for internal use, you're looking at $150 to $250 a piece, something like that. So you'll probably have to spend somewhere between $500 and $1,000, depending on how big your rental unit is, and get the large space heaters. Get, for your average 3-bedroom, 2-bath, let's call it 2,000 square feet or less. And of course, this is not any official professional recommendation. This is going off of my memory. I believe we provide, it's either 2 or 3 of the fan-based rotating stand-up space heaters, basically the largest that Lowe's and Home Depot offer. And two, for sure, of the oil-based radiant heaters, because the radiant heaters actually do a better, more efficient job, blah, blah, blah. All of them plug in. Technically, the law when it comes to heating and HVAC for you personally, specifically, the law is that you have to provide, either have it fixed or provide another heating source. So quite frankly, if you're looking at 3 weeks and possibly having them go out or possibly having to pay for a hotel otherwise, personally, I would go, yeah, let me, instead of spending, you know, 250 bucks a night for a hotel space for them, let me go spend 750 bucks, maybe 1,000 on some nice space heaters. I give it to them. I abide by the law. They're not moving out. You're still collecting rent. You get it fixed by the HVAC company. You get to collect those space heaters. Technically, you could probably return some of them depending on that. But nonetheless, I would argue as a landlord, it's good to have space heaters and even actually a dehumidifier just on hand, just for things like this. So that would actually, as I talk myself through it, that would be actually what I would recommend is forget waiting the 3 weeks or asking them to move out. Go get space heaters. They keep paying rent and they got nothing to complain about. There's nothing in the law that says in that case you would be required to give them any credits for the extra power bill, because assuming that they paid for the gas or whatever was powering the furnace, then they're still responsible for this. But if you feel like you have a tenant that is going to sue you at the drop of a hat, or you just want to be nice and want to keep them because they're great tenants, you might offer them, you know, like 50 bucks off their rent as a kind of a credit towards that utility or something. But there's nothing in the law that says you'd be required to do that. Let's see here. Other question. How do we prove our renovations as upgrade extent? Say the kitchen and bathroom, and who do we prove it to? One's contested in court, yes, but before that, while giving the notice. No, as far as the state laws are concerned, there's no pre-application process or pre-approval process. It is purely enforced by the tenant finding out after the fact that you didn't do what you said you told them you were going to do, and them suing you in court. And when they sue you in court, you then having to prove that, no, we really did renovate both bathrooms. Here's the invoices for it, judge. So unfortunately, that is it. As you'll see later in any of these notices, when you give the tenant the move out notice, if you happen to have any proof of what you're going to do, you are required to provide it. So like if you're going to demolish the unit, provide a copy of your demolition permit that you filed, you know, things like that. If you accepted an offer from someone that's going to purchase the unit, they're going to live in it, a copy of the offer or a copy of, you know, a signed statement from that purchaser stating that they're going to live in it or something like that as well. But as far as the renovation and upgrade, I mean, I guess if you really wanted to, if you already got a quote or estimate, you could include that, but you don't need to. It's not really it's not really proving that you actually did the work. So the law does leave room to where if there isn't any proof to provide, you don't have to provide it. So it really does come down to just the tenant would have to find out after the fact and then sue you for it. And then you'd have to prove, no, I really did. I renovated both bathrooms, or I renovated the whole kitchen, or whatever. Which, assuming you weren't lying, should be easy to prove. All right. Next, if a landlord or a member of their immediate family intends to occupy as their primary residence. So I will point out, if you have a property within the city limits of Portland, there is a similar in the relocation fee ordinance, there's a similar exemption, but there's a key difference. For the city of Portland relocation fee ordinance exemption that has to do with a family member moving in, it does not include the landlord/owner. It is only if family moves in. So for the city of Portland, if you're using this as a qualifying reason to ask a tenant to move out based on state law, but the reason is that you personally as the owner are going to move back into this property, then it does not qualify as an exemption for the city of Portland relocation fee ordinance, and you still have to pay that. Doesn't mean you can't do it, just means you're gonna have to pay that tenant. Let's see here. So a landlord or a member of their immediate family intends to occupy as their primary residence. As a landlord, this is important, you can't own a comparable unit that is vacant. So comparable is absolutely subjective. it comes down to, if you got sued over it, what does the judge or jury feel like was comparable at that time? Within my own company and my own advice that I give clients, I liken it to bed bath count has to be the same, because you can absolutely argue there is definitely a difference between a 2-bedroom and a 3-bedroom. They're not comparable on the open market, as well as a 1-bathroom or a 2-bathroom or a 3-bathroom. Excuse me. And so there's a little more wiggle room to argue that on the bathroom side, but for sure not on the bedroom side. Square footage, I typically like to see that, I would call it comparable, quote unquote, if it's within 300 to 500 square feet of each other. Area, neighborhood absolutely counts. There is absolutely a big difference between a rental property or a property that someone is buying in the Lake Oswego Westland School District versus Gresham School District. Well, Gresham's kind of coming up lately, but you get what I'm saying. Like a neighborhood difference that absolutely can make them not comparable, but it is subjective. So don't rely on this as a gray area if you feel if you happen to comply here. Let's see, immediate family member. I have the definition there. It seems pretty straightforward of what anyone I would think of as a immediate family member. With that said, if at some point in the future you are going to use this as a qualifying reason, or the whole immediate family member thing for the City of Portland relocation fee ordinance, make sure you actually look up that law at that time. And at the beginning of state and city laws, pretty sure federal laws are the same as well. Pretty much the very first or second section of the law that is written is the definition of terms. And so each law can have a different definition of terms. So for instance, the state law can have a different definition of immediate family member as the City of Portland law can have as a different definition. Things like that can be changed by just majority committee vote. There's not like a public vote. It's not necessarily something that's going to be advertised. So if you're going to qualify, if you think you're going to qualify for this, and you think there's any chance the blood relation or whatever might be a little bit off, just double check the law at that time and see what the official definition of immediate family member is. And it should have every type of family member absolutely spelled out that qualifies for that definition and for this exemption. For if you use any of these reasons to ask a tenant to move out that are no fault of their own after they've lived there a full year, then they must be 90-day notices. Okay. And in that notice, you must specify the reason and provide any supporting evidence if it exists. And also include with that a notice, a payment equal to 1 full month's rent that is a relocation fee. So a couple things with this. One, if you don't use your own forms and haven't already updated things, we do sell the form for this. It's specific. We have it for the state of Oregon where you can select this. We also have them specific to the City of Portland too, and their nuances. If you go to the Portland area ROA.com or the Portland Area Rental Owners Association website, we have our form store there. For that relocation fee payment, a couple things. One, by law, it is a separate transaction. So if this tenant owes you $1,500 for little Timmy breaking the front window last month, you can't deduct that from this 1 month's rent relocation fee. You still have to send them this full amount. Okay. I will say this is one of the parts that also forces landlords in my mind to kind of be strict landlords, in the sense that if you have a tenant that owes you money, that is a violation of landlord tenant law. In ORS Chapter 90, state landlord tenant law, it's towards the middle. I don't remember the exact paragraph section, but towards the middle is a whole section on tenant responsibilities. One of those responsibilities is to pay all debts owed to a landlord. It is actually a violation of landlord tenant law. If you have billed that tenant and given them a reasonable amount of time to pay, which has been accepted of anywhere from like 10 to 30 days. Within my company, we go with 30, but there's plenty of property management companies out there that do 10, seems to be perfectly well accepted. So anywhere in there, give them a reasonable amount of time to pay. They don't pay it. now they are in violation of landlord tenant law. You can now issue a 1430 termination notice, which gives them 14 days now to pay that balance that is due, or on the 30th day, they have to move out. And if they don't do either one, you get to move forward with a for-cause eviction. And if you're doing a for-cause eviction, so the tenant is committing a violation, and that's the reason you're telling them they have to move out, then you do not owe the relocation fee ordinance. So if you have that, if you are one of those landlords, when I told you this is a separate transaction, if the tenant owes you money, that you still have to send them the full month's relocation fee, and you felt offended by that or balked at it of, well, what the heck? What if, I mean, that's BS that they owe me money. Then be a landlord. And quite honestly, don't give them a 90-day notice. Give them, a reasonable amount of time to pay that debt if you haven't already. And then after that, give them a 30-day notice. Even you give them 30 days to pay it, and then you give them the 30-day termination notice, you're still at 60 days, which is less than 90, and you don't have to pay the relocation fee. Granted, after that time, you start the eviction. That absolutely could take as much as 2 to 6 weeks. So you could still be up to the 90-day time frame. But nonetheless, you're either going to get paid for that money that they owe you, and that offsets what you're paying them in now turning around and going and giving this notice and paying the relocation fee, or they're not going to pay you. You're going to end up having them evicted within about roughly around the 90 days anyway, and you won't have to pay the relocation fee. So do understand it is a totally separate transaction, but if a tenant owes you money, there's probably a better route for you to go as a landlord. If within the entire state of Oregon, you own 1 to 4 long-term residential rental units. Okay, so if you have some vacation rentals, in Central Oregon or something, those don't count. But if you have 5 single-family home rentals throughout the state of Oregon, you are not exempt. If one thing to also keep in mind, doesn't necessarily mean you should change how you're doing things. Just know if you have a home that say has 5 bedrooms in it that you rent out individually, and all the the kitchen, the living room, everything is all a common area and whatnot, and you have 5 separate leases for 5 different bedrooms, that's 5 different units. Whereas if you rented out the whole place to a bunch of different roommates all on the same lease, that's 1 unit as far as this is concerned. Also, just a heads up for the city of Portland, if you have a property like that within the city of Portland, not only would you possibly not be exempt from the state relocation fee ordinance, but in the city of Portland with the rental property registration fee per door, which is what, $60 per door, I think right now. If you have 5 bedrooms that you rent out on 5 separate leases, that's $300 in registration fees. If you have 1 5-bedroom house with 5 different roommates all on the same lease, that's $160 registration fee. So just something to consider. It could possibly just be a change in how you do your paperwork, might save you some money and keep you exempt from this state relocation fee as well. Also, just to point out really quick, for those of you who have City of Portland properties, if you qualify for both relocation fees, this state 1 month's worth of rent relocation fee and the City of Portland relocation fee that varies based on number of bedrooms, the way that the fine print of the laws has been written is that you only have to pay the total of the one that is the most, all right, which for vast majority of the time is going to be the City of Portland one. So you'll pay the state one when you serve the notice as required, subtract that from the City of Portland relocation fee, and whenever you're required to pay the City of Portland relocation fee that you qualified for, that's when the remaining balance is due. But they don't stack on top of each other. It's just you pay whichever one is the most. Another piece of this law is what was created was called I've termed the 3 strikes lease expiration. Basically what it means, and for those of you that rent month to month, or that this doesn't apply, it has to be a minimum of a 12-month lease. Okay. And so before you ask a second time, yes, if you have a month-to-month lease, or a 6-month lease, or a 9-month lease, or a 10-month lease, or an 11-month lease, you don't get the option of using the 3 strikes lease expiration rule. You have to have a minimum of a 12-month lease. And what this means is if the tenant commits 3 total violations within the remaining 12 months of their fixed term lease. So if it's a 5-year lease for some reason, it's only the last 12 months that matter. Then you can tell them that they have to move out at the end of that lease term or 90 days later, whichever is the latest. So it doesn't matter if they correct the violation. Well, actually, I mean, they wouldn't be there if they didn't correct the violations and you served them proper notice, they would be evicted for it. But so even, you know, they correct the violations. It could be 3 times in the last 12 months. They paid their rent on the 4th when it was due on the 1st. Those are all late payment of rent violations. It could be that they had one late payment violation, and when you did an inspection, you served them a violation warning notice for not picking up the dog poop, or for tossing their cigarette butts, you know, all over the porch in the yard instead of properly disposing of them, or smoking on the back porch when they're not supposed to, or whatever it is. Doesn't matter what the violation is. If they committed 3 individual violations of any kind, the same or different, in the last 12 months, then after that last violation, you can give them a termination notice that says either their move out date is the expiration date of their fixed term lease, or their move out date is 90 days after they served the notice. Obviously, if you put it in standard first class mail, then you have to add the 3 days of mailing and don't count the day you put it in the mail. So you're basically adding 4. So it turns into essentially a 94-day notice. But nonetheless, or 94 days later, whichever is latest. So if they committed the last violation when they're 30 days away from their lease expiration, then they're on the termination notice, their move out date is actually 60 days after their lease expiration, because it would be 90 days later, right? But if they happen to commit 3 violations in the first 3 months, now you're giving them a 9-month notice to where they're terminated, but they don't have to move out until the expiration date of their lease. Obviously, during that time, they commit violations where you're officially able to do a 4-cause eviction, then that trumps all of this and you're fine, still moving forward on that. Also, for this law, for the no cause notice portion, if you live in one unit and there is only one other rental unit on the property that you rent out on the tax lot, so whether it's a attached duplex or a single family home, or downstairs is like a full apartment, not officially a duplex, and you rent that out as one unit, or it's you have an ADU that you rent out. Either way, there's 2 units that people can live in, and you rent out one and you live in the other as your primary residence. If that is the case, then for that one unit that you share a tax lot with, then you are exempt from what we talked about, and is basically exactly how what the law was prior to this, which is still have the 30-day no cause in the first year, and after that first year, you can give a 60-day no cause notice, and there is no relocation fee owed. I will say this does not apply to the City of Portland relocation fee ordinance. Okay, so you may be exempt on this, but for City of Portland rental properties, you still have to do a 90-day. You're still going to pay the relocation fee for the City of Portland unless you're exempt. Let's see here. Kelly asks about, the 3 strikes rule. Is it only good for fixed term lease? How about month to month? Yes, as I said very clearly at the beginning of that, if you are month to month, you do not get to use the 3 strikes rule. If you have a 9-month fixed term lease, you do not get to use the 3 strikes rule. It is clearly written in the law that it has to be a fixed term lease of a minimum of 12 full months. If it is anything less than that, then you don't get to use the 3 strikes rule. So it's essentially, they threw that in the negotiation of that bill. They threw that in as a way to try and because they did away with like the whole no cause thing, and really a lot of the incentives of a landlord even doing fixed term leases. And so they threw that in as hopefully a carrot to get landlords to still offer fixed long-term leases instead of only doing month to month. But yeah, if you're month to month, then you don't get to take advantage of that, unfortunately. All right. Rent increases. Okay, so rent increases for the state of Oregon. They installed a rent increase limit that is a variable limit that'll change every year. And it gets announced by the end of September every year. So what this law did, SB 608, is made it so that you cannot raise the rent at all during the first year of occupancy, which City of Portland has also the same law. So even if this changed the state level, City of Portland, you still have to abide by it. You can serve your 90-day rent increase notice during the first year of occupancy, but the actual rent increase can't take effect until at least one day after well, actually, not even one day, until the next rental period due date after they've lived there one full year. So like, for instance, I say it that way because like if they moved in mid-month, you can't make their rent increase, but their rent is due on the first of every month. You can't make their rent increase be a prorated change mid-month a year later. It has to take effect on the first of the following month a year later. So it has to be a minimum of 90 days. If you do a 12-month lease, you can serve the notice, 9 months in. That's a 90-day notice to where the rent increase takes effect on the first rental due date after their lease expires, right? So you can serve the notice during the fixed term lease. It just can't take effect until after. Let's see here. In any 12-month period, the maximum rent increase is going to be equal to 7% plus the year-over-year change in the consumer price index. Okay, so what this means, and quite honestly, you don't need to be an expert on the consumer price index. If you want to be, you can look it up. I've got the website there in the PDF printer-friendly file of these in the shared class materials folder. You have access. You can copy and paste that link. You might actually, I think in the PDF you can just click on it to look it up if you want. But basically, what happens is in September of every year, the Oregon Department of Administrative Services is going to look at what was the West Coast Consumer Price Index number last September, and what is the West Coast Consumer Price Index this September. Couple things. One, I will say, even though, of course, it's a Democrat-controlled state legislature at the time when this was passed, and we had no choice. This law was going through no matter what. One of our feathers, I guess, or wins, so to speak, if we can really latch on to anything, is that instead of doing the nationwide consumer price index, we convince them to just do the Western region consumer price index indices. And it actually, as landlords, actually cut or increased that because we have just the way the numbers worked out. That worked out in our favor, so to speak. But nonetheless, what this is, consumer price index, it's a measurement of our economy. If we've got a booming economy, it's going to be a big number in the last year. If we have a shrinking economy, it's going to be a smaller number over the last year. And it's a year over year change, whatever that changes, whatever that consumer price index number was last September, subtracted from the consumer price index number of this September, that amount is added on to the 7% and gets us our yearly maximum rent increase rate. For this current year, 2023, it's at 14.6%. Prior years were actually under 10% in the 9% range. So it will change each year. The reason they pick September is nothing magical. It's simply since you are required to give a 90-day notice. If you wanted a rent increase to take effect January 1st of next year, when this rent increase limit would apply, then they're telling you have to give a 90-day notice, and therefore you need to know what the maximum rent increase is, what that limit is, before you violate the law prior to the end of September, because the latest that you'd be able to serve that notice would be October 1st, so that it takes effect January 1st. That's the only reason they pick September. Let's see here. Kelly has a question. How do you count the first year lease? Is it count 365 and the tenant requests extra 15 days? Actually, yeah. Kelly, you might have been one of the ones that joined a little bit late, but yeah, I covered that at the beginning. As a management company, prior to this law, we did calculate our year leases where if they moved in mid-month, it would be to the end of that month next year. So it'd be a year plus a couple weeks. Because of that no cause notice law, we now go the other way, so that as always, their first year lease ends less than a year later, so that we still reserve the right to do that no cause notice. So yeah, you do have to calculate it differently and make sure that that first year lease term is a maximum of exactly a year. I would argue back it off by a week or two, just so you have a little bit of margin of error, so to speak, if you don't send out the notice on exactly, the first day you can and whatnot. And then after that first year, if they renew it, great. Do, year plus on everything that is their cheapest rent increase, and hopefully that's what they go for. Okay, so consumer price index, talked about that. In between tenancies, and this also applies for the City of Portland relocation fee ordinance. If tenant moves out, you're advertising for a new tenant, there is no limit on how much you ask. The limit only has to do with the people that are currently in the unit and how much you raise it on them. Let's see here. The only exemption from this, where you'd have to follow that year's rent increase limit, is if you did give a no cause notice in the first year. So if you give a tenant a no cause notice that first year, then if it was right now 2023, then the most that you can ask for rent for the next new tenant would be 14.6% above what that last tenant paid. But if you give them a no cause notice for one of the qualifying reasons we talked about after the first year, or the tenant just gives you a move out notice and they voluntarily move out, or you do a for cause eviction because the tenant is violating your lease or landlord tenant law, in any of those situations, which is, probably 99% of tenancies, 90% of tenancies, you can go ahead and ask full market rent for the next tenant. Doesn't matter how much more it is than the current one. Other exemption is if you are exempt from these rent increase limits if, one, you are providing reduced rent as part of a government program. Hold on before you ask. If you have a tenant that is on Section 8, you're getting payments from, say, like Home Forward or Salem Housing Bureau or, Section 8, right? That does not qualify. If you qualified for this, you would know it, because odds are you would have someone at least working part-time, just keeping up on the government paperwork. This is where the government decides who can and can't live in your property, and the government decides exactly how much rent they pay each month based on how much they made that particular month. So it varies quite a bit. You would know it if you qualified for this. If you're wondering, hey, I wonder if I qualify for that, I can be 99% sure you don't. It is not Section 8. Section 8 doesn't actually force you to charge what rent you do or don't do. It's just a matter of, hey, if your rent is higher than what this tenant is qualified for their Section 8 voucher, they just don't qualify to rent your unit and they have to move on. So just know it is different. You wouldn't know if you qualify for that. The other one, dwelling is less than 15 years old. This is one that you are exempt. You can raise the rent as much as you want on any tenants at any given time for the first 15 years of occupancy. Couple reasons. I mean, it doesn't matter the reason. It's pretty straightforward. I just had a client who finished building a sixplex down in Wilsonville. Obviously, in order to convert from the construction loan to the permanent loan, you need to have at least 50% of the units filled. So we've got things, probably about a $500 a month discount, quite honestly, because they're really nice units. And if we want to, for those that move in on the heavy discount, after their first year renewal, or technically, if we did it month to month, we could do it quick. I wouldn't do this because I wouldn't think it'd be a good business practice. Technically, a couple months after they move in, we could do a rent increase of, originally they should be renting for probably about $2,750 to $3,000 a month. I think we've got them listed at $2,250 to $2,500. So it's about, if we're going from 2,500 all the way up to 3,000 full market, that would be a 20% increase. Technically, if we wanted to, we could do that anytime in the first 15 years. The reason for this, if anyone is wondering, is simply because that's actually where large apartment complex developers, that's typically about their investment plan. They finance plenty of the development investment, obviously put their own cash into it. They get things leased out really quickly early on. Same reason that my small clients of the 6 unit have to, because they got to convert from the construction and initial investment contracts and loans and everything up to a permanent loan fixed, typically a 15-year fixed, hence the 15 years. Sometimes it'll be 10. Their goal is to get it all paid off, all the debt and everything paid off in the first 10 years. Then they make a bit of profit in about a 5-year time while they're trying to get it sold. They cash out. take the majority of their profit in when they sell it to someone that wants to buy it, hold on to it long term, and they develop the next apartment complex with that money. That's where that 15-year time frame comes to. Let's see here. Brooks says, if rent is raised for month-to-month rent in PDX to greater than 10%, to essentially force a tenant to move, when does the 6-month decision time start? Once tenant notifies, they'll take the relocation fee within 44 days. When landlord pay them 30 days from then, or from the date of a new rent start. Any concerns with this tactic? Already tried cash for keys. Well, I will say, take my class on that. We have a free class. Take a full hour and a half on it to cover it. But you kind of actually already answered your question in there. It seems like you already read the law and know it. You give a rent increase of over 10% in the city of Portland. It's not illegal. It still counts. It's perfectly fine. But the tenant has up to 45 days to tell you, that is too much for me. I have to move because of it, and therefore I want my relocation fee. You're required to pay them the relocation fee within a reasonable amount of time. So basically, just put it in the freaking mail that day. Quite honestly, protect yourself. There's no reason to go to court over it. And then if they don't move within 6 months from the time they told you that they're going to and request the relocation fee, then you can require them to pay it back to you, etc. But quite honestly, Brooks, it sounds like you already know that information because you have a lot of that key info in there, and I think you just need me to put it together for you and say it out loud. All right, rent increase limits, penalties. If you violate anything that we talked about already, so the SB608, so the rent increase limits that we talked about, the state level, it is different than the city of Portland. That rent increase limit this year of 14.6, it's a law. So city of Portland, if you raise it by more than 10%, it's not illegal. It just triggers the option of the tenant taking a relocation fee if they can't afford it and they want to move because of it. For the state of Oregon, it's illegal to raise your rent by even 1 penny more than the current year's limit, which currently is 14.6. You know, who knows what it'll be next year. Last year was 9.9, I think, something like that. If you raise it 1 penny more, not only does your rent increase not count, but it's a violation of this law. Also, if you violate the no cause notice portion of the law, it is a violation of the law. You automatically, as a penalty, owe the tenant 3 times 1 month's rent, as well as actual damages and most likely any legal expenses if it goes to court. So if you have a tenant that comes to you and goes, hey, I'm pretty sure you violated this law and you owe me this money, and you go back to your office and do some calculations or look at it, look it up and go, oh shit, I really did. Even if it was an honest mistake, the cheapest option for you is to cut them a check for 3 times 1 month's rent and pay them and get it over with. Because the moment they hire an attorney, because you dig your heels in and don't want to out of principle, which don't get me wrong, say you made a miscalculation, made an honest mistake, and you raised the rent by $10 more than what it was legally allowed to be. And they called you on it. And technically they've only been paying that for a few months. So you really only cost them like $30. Why the hell should you have to pay them like $6 grand on a $2,000 a month rental? I get it. I agree with you. But if you don't, and you don't just cut them the check while they're demanding it, saying, nope, you violated this law, then their next step is they have a tenant attorney who doesn't charge them anything up front because they see, oh no, it's plain and simple. They violated the law. This is an easy win. Write you a super scary letter that includes, hey, pay the tenant this 3 times a month's rent, plus the lowest I've seen is $500. The highest one I've seen is $1,500. Just to me as the lawyer for legal fees, just to take the time to write this letter. And then of course, if you fight it from there, they go to court and it just keeps getting more expensive. Obviously, this is with the assumption that you did actually violate the law. If you didn't violate the law, then please don't, hopefully you can prove it and you can stand your ground. But if you find out, oh, I accidentally did, and the tenant is demanding that you follow through on these penalties, whether you like it or not, the cheapest option is to just cut them a check. HB 291, the screening requirements that were passed at the state level. And we'll probably see some small alterations to this and some timing things later this year, would be my guess, but those laws haven't actually been passed yet. So I don't know. That's just, my assumption based on what I've seen going on. Number one, they put it officially in writing and that you can't profit from your screening fees, which technically that was already part of case state law anyway, so it's kind of redundant. You're not supposed to profit from it. As far as your screening criteria is concerned, it's always been a law. You're required to have it. So if you don't have it, get it. The Portland area ROA.com. If you go to our form store, I'm pretty sure we have kind of a base like screening criteria template that you can use, as well as ones for the city of Portland and their special laws and stuff to start with. And then, obviously over time, kind of customize that to your own stuff. But also, so now in the screening criteria, they've also added to the state law that you must state the tenant's right to appeal a negative decision if possible. If you turn down a tenant and they decide, well, that information isn't accurate, I can prove that it's not, I want to appeal this, you have to give them the ability to do so. This is really mostly only going to come into play for large management companies. I'm given the ability to do so. That does not mean you hold that unit for them. They've been denied, you move on to the next applicant. If they give you information that's like, oh, if I had this information, I would have approved you, then all that means is that now they can rent one of your other vacant units that is basically the same as that and has the same qualifications. So it's not, you're not holding on to a vacant unit while you go through this process. You're moving on, and then that just approves them that. That's why I say it's probably only going to apply to your larger management companies, because you're like 46 or 48% of all the rental properties in Portland metro area that are owned by landlords that have 4 or less units. I mean, you have one vacancy a year, maybe, right? And so there's, not much point in someone appealing with you and going through that process if it's like, well, I mean, I don't know when I'm going to have one, a vacancy available again, right? With that said, if they ask, you have to let them. You can't tell them, tell them that they can't. You can explain to them the likelihood of it mattering, and then they have that option of still moving forward or not. Let's see here. You must include a applicable non-discrimination policy. It does not have to be these exact words, but it has to be something to this effect. You are welcome to copy and paste this. I believe we actually have for free in the form store a non-discrimination policy text that you can just use that addendum if you want to. And it's essentially stating, as a landlord, I'm not going to discriminate against any of the protected classes at the local, state, and federal levels. Excuse me. Also added that you're not allowed to consider anything on their criminal record for crimes that are not currently at the time of them applying illegal. The main thing on this would be like drug offenses that are now legal. So, if 10 years ago they had a felony on their record for possessing more than an ounce of marijuana, when it wasn't legal, which I don't even know if 10 years ago it still wasn't legal or not, but you get my example. And now today you do a screening that's still on their criminal record, but it would not be illegal at all for them to have an ounce of marijuana on them right now. You can't hold that against them. So anything that would not be legal today can't be held against someone applying. If you deny them, you're required to send it within 14 days. And you must include the contact info for any outside reporting companies that you provided information that you used in conjunction with denying their application. As far as the 14 days, it used to just be a reasonable amount of time. I would argue, why do you want to have to deal with the phone calls, texts, and or emails, or them checking up on it all the time? I would say if you're going to deny them, let them know right away. No reason to wait 14 days. Let's see here. And you must provide a personalized assessment before denying. All this means is that you are required, if they provided additional information with their application, like a letter of recommendation or a statement from their parole officer of how great they've done and they've passed all their drug tests and blah, blah, blah. Any additional information, if they provide that and you're looking at denying them, you have to be able, if the tenant wanted to sue you over it and you were in court, you would need to be able to show the judge or prove to the judge, no, I considered all that extra information and it still was not enough for me to overturn their denial. That's all. You have to be able to honestly say that you considered it. Let's see here. Catherine asks, can you deny because of pets? What are the rules regarding emotional support pets? Catherine, you asked a question that takes an hour to answer. I have classes on that specifically. Short answer is yes. If you say no pets and they just have a pet, by definition of the law, you can deny them. If they have an emotional support animal, that is not considered a pet by the letter of the federal law, and you have to consider it. And unless you have a solid reasonable reason why it's not a reasonable request, which just not allowing pets is not considered a good reason. It has to be like a pet with a history of violence against the other neighbors or humans or something like that. You have to allow it. You can't charge a pet rent, and you can't charge a pet deposit. But look for, I think at least 2 to 4 times a year, I teach a class. I teach a class regularly every couple months on fair housing, but you want to look for on our class schedules when it specifically says like fair housing and emotional support animals and reasonable accommodations. I think if I remember right, I want to say normally it's like a part of a 2 to 3 hour class, something like that, Catherine. And we go over that in detail, but that is the gist of it. If they have an emotional support animal or a service animal, it's technically not considered a pet by law. You are required to allow it unless you have a strong reason why not, like they have a history of violence, and that you can prove by, interviewing previous landlords or something. And you're not allowed to charge a pet deposit. You're not allowed to charge any pet rent. Yan asks, if I find out my landlord increased my rent over the limit 2 years ago, could I pursue that, or is there a time limit for that? So Jan, my official answer is I would suggest talking to legal aid. There's multiple free options to talk to them, run by them, and get official legal advice without having to, pay a bunch of money. So look up like legal aid. I think if you go through the Portland Housing Bureau, they should be able to connect you with them, something like that, or some local, nonprofit attorney organization that be able to help you out with that. My understanding, and again, I definitely cannot be giving you, official legal advice, but my understanding is that for anything that is not discrimination based, there is a 1-year statute of limitations to where from the time that you could be reasonably expected to know the violation happened, you have 1 year to sue a landlord, and a landlord has 1 year to sue a tenant. It goes both ways. If it's discrimination based, then I believe you have 2 years. But again, for you specifically, Yan, sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, I probably am. I would reach out to legal aid, for tenants, because there absolutely are free options for tenants and even landlords, like actually to get some at least basic legal advice. And I think that would be a straightforward question they'll probably be able to answer for you in a more official capacity than I can. All right. Next thing, as part of these classes, we're kind of wrapping up here. We're going to like I said, get you guys out of here early. The City of Portland funds a landlord mediation pilot project. This is not required at all. This is not Multnomah County or Washington County based or anything like that. It is City of Portland based. If you are a landlord or a tenant and you feel like mediation, having an independent third party who's not an attorney, who doesn't allow attorneys in the room, that might help you and your tenant come to some sort of agreement, which who knows, the agreement might be paying you money. It might be you foregoing this money and then peacefully moving out so you don't have to evict them, or who knows what it is. But if you think there's a chance, reach out to Resolution Northwest. All their contact information is here. I believe I have this flyer as its own independent PDF in the class materials, if I remember right. Reach out to them. Quite frankly, from a landlord's perspective, City of Portland, they're doing this considering it as, making a requirement in the eviction process. Down in Marion County in Salem. So I do, within my property management company, of course, we do full management. We have a placement service where we'll do all the advertising, the screening, and place a tenant in your unit, do the move-in inspection, all the leasing, and then turn it back over to you manage. But we also do evictions for hire, eviction processing. And when we do that, I get hired all around the state, it's a slightly cheaper option than an attorney. And so down in Marion County, when I do inspections there, they have mediation as a requirement. If they made a requirement here, like in the county courts here in the Portland area, if they did it like there, to where it doesn't actually add any extra time to the process of evicting, a number of days, to where you go into court and instead of you go up to the judge and say, hey, we can't reach an agreement, here's our stipulated agreement and we're happy, or we didn't reach an agreement, we have to have a trial. In order to get the trial, if that's the route you're going, then they require, okay, you got to go wait in the hall, probably adds an hour or two to your day, which is unfortunate, but it's not any days, right? And for it to go in for mediation, you go in for mediation, lawyers aren't allowed. If you come to an agreement there with an independent third party, trying to make sure everyone has their turn to talk and mediate, then you come out with a stipulated agreement, or you still can't reach an agreement and you get your trial anyway, and no time was lost. So it is a good thing. So definitely use it so they can get their data if you have opportunities for that. Colleen asks, are there screening requirements that must be included when advertising a rental, such as fair housing statement and other required notices, or just give potential applicants those notices when showing them the property? Colleen, you need to take, I think do I teach it monthly, or is that just the move out one? We teach a regular class on advertising a property, screening, all that stuff. There are requirements for the city of Portland properties. That's actually one of the classes that's for free. It's about an hour and a half on all the screening ordinances and laws in the city of Portland for those rentals. So yes, there are, but too many for me to just answer quickly, unfortunately. Yes, there's definitely fair housing things that you want to include, as well as things you want to avoid saying as well. Let's see here. And yeah, that's that. So a couple of things to save before anyone starts bailing. If you want continuing education credits, please do your end of class check-in now. Get that done in the chat room. And thank you for those kind words. Couple things, this last slide, of course, rpmeducation.org, save that, check for all of our upcoming classes. We have these free ones paid for the city of Portland, as well as classes that you do have to pay for that aren't paid for by a government grant coming up. We typically have, I think, anywhere from 4 to 10 classes a month. Also save the Portland Housing Bureau and Real Services help desk or office contact info you see on your screen now. It's also in that PDF of the class slides. Let's see here. Lori, I got yours. I know there's at least 3 or 4 that I'm missing that were checked in at the beginning. Make sure you do your CE credit check-ins, guys. So save that information. It is helpful. You use them if you have questions, some kind of gray area or something like that. Let's see. And then last thing, before I let you guys go, keep an eye out for class follow-up emails. There's going to be a couple links in there. One of them is for the City of Portland grant reporting. It's for a survey that you fill out anonymously, gives you your take on the class and the class subject and all that stuff, helps us keep getting this blank grant renewed every year. And then the other one is, if you enjoyed it, this was beneficial for you, then click the other link to leave us a 5-star Google review, as we definitely appreciate it. All right. I'll wait for a couple seconds, see if anyone has any more classes. AG asks, how do you sign up for more than one class with the same username? Yeah, you should be able to use the same username and log in on there, AG, to sign up. If you're having trouble or can't figure that out, there's a contact us link in there, or kind of a help link or whatever. Shoot us an email through that, and my IT team, they'll get that and be able to make sure you're guided in the right way, or get things taken care of for you. Let's see here. Michael asks, great class. Thank you for the kind words. I have a rental in Clackamas County. Do you have a reference for a lease review attorney? I have 8-month fixed term tenants. I want to extend another 5 months. Want to make sure I don't blow it. The main thing I do, so I know he gets busy, and I don't have any official, relationship with him, referral relationship or anything like that. So I can't guarantee, that, if you drop my name, that he'll have time. It all depends on his schedule. But I actually use Michael Ross in Portland as my go-to landlord attorney when I have questions and stuff. I don't know what he charges on a basic consulting like that. My guess is your typical attorney in Portland, I'm guessing he'll probably charge around 500 or something like that would probably be the going rate, that I wouldn't be surprised if it's at least that. But yeah, if you do a quick web search for him, I think his website and everything, I think his website is actually just Michael Ross Attorney. or something like that. But he's my go-to. But like, also just know, I mean, this is a City of Portland paid for class. I don't want it to come across like it's an advertisement for him. If you do a quick web search and stuff, or you go through some of the other landlord support associations, there's at least 2 or 3 other attorneys in the Portland metro area that focus on representing landlords that are, I'm sure, just as good as Michael is. He just happens to be, he helped me get started in one of my associations and whatnot. So I've just had a long-term relationship with them in that respect. But there's multiples that you could go to, especially since with the COVID restrictions being lifted. Quite honestly, it depends on from it changes from one week to another, which landlord attorney actually has enough free time to take on a new client, even on a consulting basis. So, do a little bit of your research. Let's see here. Cool. All right. I don't see any other big questions or anything. Here in a bit, we'll be getting out CE credits, as well as we'll try sending out a link for a recording of the class in case anyone missed anything. Give you like a week or 2 to do a refresher watch of it, stuff like that. So, all right. Thank you guys. Really appreciate it. Hopefully we'll see you in some future classes.